Hi, everybody. Let's grab our friends over on Twitch here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. Got a little toy to show you just a couple of minutes from now, getting set up. Hope everybody's doing well. It is the 10th of December, and we are back. Yeah, anyway, just spent the last couple seconds before we went on the air putting together a little piece of something. It is, I was resisting the temptation to show this fragment because it's just a fragment and it's so early in the process. But I've been talking about it for a while. I was hoping I might have some more to show by tonight, but it's taken a little longer than I'd originally hoped, but that's also to be expected because it's kind of cutting edge technology. I'm talking about the holy grail of desktop filmmaking, which is a person who's done nothing but analyze this for a long, long time. Seems to me to boil down to something pretty simple. So give me a second here to. What did I do here? Hang on. No, that's not what I want either. Where did it go? I'm trying to find my comments over on Twitch here. I somehow enlarged the screen. Where did they go? Never done that before. I can't see the Twitch comments, so let me close that window and see if I can log back in there. The stream will stay going. Sorry about all this last minute stuff here. Hang on. Hope everybody's doing well. No. I got to be able to see those comments. It's in theater mode. That's one way to do it. Okay, I can see them. I'm not off to the side the way they usually are, but at least I can see them. So I'll sort that out a little later. So I'll put that over here, I reckon. Yeah, that might work. And I've got the YouTube comments up there. So anyway, here we are. So let me go over this again for those of you who haven't heard this story. It's okay because we're basically just doing this whole pitch from scratch here. Oh my God! Hang on. It just has a mind of its own. They could barely get me into the MRI machine. So anyway, here's what I was talking about. Pointing left pointing arrow in the top right part of the screen that will expand the comment. I've got the comments down below. I don't see the thing, but right now we're okay. So I'm not gonna sweat it. I'll worry about it later. I'm already distracting people enough. So here's basically the thing in a nutshell. Dave Big Booty says, like Bernie Sanders, Bill combs his hair with the balloon. Yeah, I got to rub it against some wool first. So here's the issue in a nutshell for those of you who are relatively new to this problem. AI video is photorealistic. It is indistinguishable from real imagery because it uses real imagery. There's no. I've seen the latest AI imagery, and it is indistinguishable from real life. And some of the latest stuff, they've been doing a lot of like retro 1950s science fiction girls and stuff. And these women are more beautiful than anyone I've ever seen because they're not real. They're perfect. I'm sure they make their eyes slightly larger, whatever they have to do. But these retro sci-fi babe 2-minute videos of these girls lounging in these kind of plastic, 60s bubbles, and they're absolutely amazing. So if you could make a movie just using AI, you wouldn't have to worry about anything. So the AI, I'm going to use two different terms, AI and CG. AI is where they manipulate video images, and the AI is visually perfect in terms of how the video looks, but it's very poor. I've still not been able to see them use very realistic images and do a perfect lip sync, for example. And AI is not good with objects at all, because this is the thing that most people don't realize about AI, and this is different than CG. AI is entirely two-dimensional. Give it 20 or 30 years, says FN Geek AZ. I was tempted to say give it 20 or 30 minutes. But it's moving fast. But at the moment, as we speak now, it's been a while, and AI has consistently had this problem. Now, AI, when it first came out, just 2 years ago, AI videos, 2-3 years ago tops, everything was constantly morphing, and it gave you that nightmare landscape. And I kind of liked it as just as a sort of because I tend to like things like Eraserhead and bizarre stuff, but it was having a very hard time stabilizing faces, and things would just be morphing into other things. They've gotten very, very good at stabilizing faces and reproducing the same face in different angles, but they can't really get the lip sync right, and the expressions are, you can tell it to smile or to laugh or to nod, but it's not so far been able to really do any performances. But it's not the people that are the problem. It's things like any kind of an object, a spaceship. It doesn't know what the other side of the spaceship looks like. It's only created a 2D version. Sorry about that. Of the image, because AI only sees in 2D. All AI does is go out and get billions or trillions of 2D images, flat screen images, and then extrapolate what the backside of a cube looks like. So it doesn't know what the backside of a spaceship looks like. It can draw kind of an interesting, if you play with it a lot, kind of an interesting looking retro spaceship or something, but you can't build the spaceship, at least not yet. You can't say this is what I want the Nostromo to look like, or this. You can just tell it, make a saucer, okay, elongate the saucer, put some chrome on the front, and so on and so on and so on. And you have very little to no control over that. And you have very, very little control over the camera, too. You can say things like close-up or so on, but you can't track the camera. You can't place the camera. And you can't place the camera inside a 3D scene because AI doesn't see it as a 3D scene. It's giving you what you're asking for on a 2D plane. So I can say, show me a rabbit being eaten by a Martian tripod with tentacles, and it will do, a passable job of that. Let's just say we're at the point where it can do essentially a photorealistic job of that. I don't get to position the tentacles. I don't get to have the tentacles wave before they go down. I don't get to, it's very, very, very difficult to do anything storytelling with it. You can make these incredible images, and I've seen amazing stuff. And again, this is just in 2 years of evolution. So what AI is doing is visually spectacular and visually perfect. It's as good as real video. And that's in its own little universe. Then there's CG. CG has got one of the subsets of CG is something called hard body modeling, which is metallic surfaces or plastic surfaces or things of that nature. CG has been very, very good at hard body surfaces for a long time. CG's been very good at animal deformations, deforming the skin, dinosaurs walking, and the CG for dinosaurs has been very good. We don't have a problem with CG T-Rexes. We think they look terrific because we don't have real T-Rexes to compare it to. And they're usually lit in such a way so that either the entire environment is CG, so you don't really get the sense of that, or lit in the dark or in the rain or something to give it a sheen so that it looks like that. Okay, so CG is able to do hard body surfaces perfectly. Many, in fact, virtually all of the car ads that you've ever seen on TV in the last 5 years have not been real cars. They've been CG cars driving through a real landscape, or in some cases a CG mountain road. But things like cars and stuff they're perfect. So CG allows you to build a spaceship down to the tiniest little greeble that you want to put on it. And no matter what angle you rotate that spaceship into, the spaceship proportions and the greebles and the textures will be perfect, because in CG there is in fact a three-dimensional world. It's a digital three-dimensional world, but it understands that this point is XYZ coordinate over here, and this point's got an XYZ coordinate over here, and when you move them around, it calculates the perspective, and it works perfectly. So you've got these two different domains, and in the CG domain, the weakness that has consistently been human faces, which is the uncanny valley issue. Let me see if I can enlarge this. 1 second here. No, I can't do that. So far so good, right? So if you want to make feature films on a desktop, you've got the CG world, where even with Unreal 5, in Unreal 5, you don't even have to wait the rendering times. The big holdup in the CG world used to be rendering times. They still exist, but we were used to render farms, because one frame, remember we're talking 24 frames a second, one frame might take 2-3 hours to render. Sometimes one frame might take 3-4 hours to render one frame. And I was doing the first Aurora tests. Those frames were taking an hour and a half. You would set the computer up to run all night. You turn it on at nighttime, and when you'd wake up in the morning, it would render 9 frames. You've got a third of a second or something, and you played the third of the second, you go, wow, that looks great, but it takes forever. Now with game engines like Unreal, they've been able to do amazing things. I don't need to render at 30 frames a second. I don't need to render at 60 frames a second, which is considered to be the minimum for video games these days, 60 frames a second. I don't need that. So if I take the Unreal Engine and I throw in all of the reflections and all of the other stuff, and it renders out at 2 frames a second or 1 frame every 2 seconds, I'm over the moon happy, because I'm getting a frame every second instead of a frame every hour. So you've got in Unreal Engine, you've got a rendering device that will do environments, buildings, objects, rovers, spaceships, pretty good particle effects for things like fire and jets and flames and all the rest of it. And it looks really good. But the only thing that you cannot get right are the human faces. Even the best human faces look a little bit off. But the human faces in AI are perfect, because the AI database, which is the entire internet, the database of human faces is perfect. The AI is doing something very different than the CG is doing. The CG is trying to make a series of little points that have textures on them and reflections and light to make them look like actual images, and it's doing the best it can, but it's not really designed for that. It's designed for hard body objects, and so the CG humans come off looking like computer-generated characters. Now, you can live with this if you want to stay in the world. There are times when I'm playing DCS, which is a computer game. It's a really advanced flight sim. And there are times in DCS when I think, man, that is absolutely photoreal, and I realize, no, it's not. I've just been in the game world long enough so that everything in the world is CG. But if I close my eyes and imagine what a real takeoff in a real Hornet looks like, it looks nothing like this. It looks much, much better. So, a while ago, about a year ago, maybe pushing 2 years now, was what I thought the breakthrough moment. And the breakthrough moment was when we were able to do deepfake. So stay with me here. So deepfake would be if you would take a real actor like me and had this conversation right now. Now, they have filters that'll do this on the phones right now. That's how fast things are advancing. Silent Gloves, I've been on DCS I've been talking about starting a Stratosphere Squadron on DCS, and I got actually some emails from people about it. I just haven't been able to follow up on it, but I'm getting there. The deepfake, basically, if you want to replace let's say you want Tom Cruise in this chair right now, you would probably still have to render it, although they're getting close to being able to do it in real time. So what you got is you got me talking, And when you run it through the deepfake AI, what the deepfake AI does is it looks at every single frame of my expressions, like this one. It's not my best expression, but you get the idea. And on a frame by frame basis, it looks at my expression, goes and finds, you show it thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures of Tom Cruise, and it looks for what Tom Cruise's mouth looks like at that angle, what his angle of his nose looks like, and it takes essentially takes an actual frame of Tom Cruise from somewhere, picks the one that closest matches your angle, adjusts the lighting to match the tone and the lighting that is on me right now, and glues it on top of my face. And since it does this on every frame, the performance is perfect. It looks like a good deepfake looks exactly like Tom Cruise just sitting here talking to you. And you can do exactly the same thing with the voice in exactly the same way. So having Tom Cruise host the Stratosphere Lounge is a piece of cake. Could be nothing to it. It's just easy these days. But what I've been working on is how do you get the control of the world that you get with CG and the realism that you get with AI, and put these two things together so that you can control the camera movement, have great looking spaceships, have all of the people walking down the hallway, all of these things that give AI a problem. How do you get that perfect? Because I can tell AI, have people walking down a science fiction corridor, and we're at the point now where it will do a good job of showing people walking down a science fiction corridor, but I don't get to design the corridor exactly, and I certainly don't get to design the ads that are playing in the background on the corridor. See what I'm saying? You can do all of that in CG. So for me, the holy grail was using CG characters, which look like computer game characters, and then having AI take the faces and deep fake the faces, not onto another person's face, but onto a metahuman face. That was, for me, the holy grail. And so I found a guy who was able to do that. Now I gave him a clip from the interview I did. I put together a 6-minute interview with the 4 guys from Major Mace Mattingly, including the interviewer. I just got a question here real quick. Why can't you tell the AI you want the corridor to look like? Because I have 200 different CGI corridors that have different shapes, different blocks, tubes, piping. You can't describe all of that stuff. And even if you could tell it, on the wall I want to have 3 white pipes and a red pipe. I want every 4 feet to have a vertical column that conforms to the wall, but it's got chambered, sides. It's just not practical. So this is what I'm saying, where you have total control in the CGI world, but you have total realism in the AI world, and there had to be a way to fuse these things. So I finally found a guy online who was doing what I wanted to do. They're not the best AI, they're not the best CG characters, but they're good. They're very good, and that's the metahumans that come free with Unreal Engine. They're good-looking computer-generated characters, but they look like computer-generated characters. And for Major Mace Mattingly, I was content with that because people have grown up with computer-generated characters. This entire generation has grown up with things like Halo and Call of Duty, and you could do it that way. It just doesn't look like real TV, but that was one option, getting it realistic enough. So in this interview, I created 4 characters. I created Mace Mattingly, Steven Sinclair, Jeff Gordon, and Doug Davenport, these 4 astronauts. And I spent a lot of time getting these faces the way I want them. I can do that in CG. It's much harder in AI to give it, like, I want the eyes slightly larger. I want to move them a little bit closer together. I want this kind of eyebrow instead of that kind of eyebrow. You just can't really do that with AI. You just can't. So I got these 4 faces the way I really like them. And then I realized I could probably deep fake, for the sake of the argument, I could deep fake Tom Cruise onto Mace Mattingly, and I could deep fake, Donald Sutherland onto this guy. I could do that. But what I wanted AI to deep fake characters that looked like the CGI characters because I can tweak the CGI. I got Mace Mattingly exactly the way I wanted him. It took me months to get Mace Mattingly exactly, precisely the way I wanted him to look. So I found this guy who was able to basically tweak AI to make it look like the CGI characters, and it's a lot of work. And I want to help this guy develop this technique because it's the holy grail. So if this process works, and I'm about to show you the most early basic test, which is only 2 seconds long. But if the process works, then you can make feature films on the desktop. You basically make the film in Unreal Engine, and everything looks fantastic. And then when it comes time to use humans, people's faces, instead of using the metahumans, you use the metahumans, you do facial motion capture, you've got metahumans in there, they look like good computer game characters, but then when you've got them in the computer generated world, you stick the AI visual processing over the face only, and you get real looking human faces, and that's the goal. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to play for you 2 seconds. I've looped it 3 times because it's only 2 seconds long. Well, 4 seconds long. This is what the guy did as his first test. It's a line from Davenport, one of the CGI characters. So what you're about to see is the CGI character saying 2 lines. The lines are clipped because I cut away and he hasn't done the other character, so just take it for what it is. These are fragments. But you're going to see the CG character, and then you're going to see the first pass without any light adjustments or anything of what this CG character would look like if it were a real actor. Okay? So you're going to see a CG character, and then you're going to see a person that doesn't exist that is an AI representation of what that metahuman CG character looks like. So it's already queued up in YouTube, so I have to put it into Twitch and just drag the format out. So I'll do the Twitch first, and then I'll play it. So just hang on, and like I say, I'll run through it 3 times. So hopefully this will work here.
You know, if you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals up here sometimes. If you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals up here sometimes. You know, if you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals up here sometimes. If you guys want to finish, you know, if you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals up here sometimes. If you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals up here sometimes. You know, if you guys want to finish for me here, I've got an ice cold hams waiting for me in the fridge. It's like living among jackals.
Just let the it might be just repeating on YouTube. Give me 1 second on YouTube here. Last time. Okay, so yeah. Now, as I say, that's the first pass. There's a halo around his head. That's part of the matting process. His skin is too dark. That's easy to do. We just simply lighten it up. It's an exposure thing. But that looked like I got an actor to come in and sit in the chair, and when you do the color adjustment, he's considerably darker. The halo is easy to fix. When you get him color corrected, and then this is an old trick. But then if you do something like you put a little film grain, you put the film grain on the AI face, and the film grain also goes onto the background, and then it tends to make the whole thing look like one process. You go in there and do a little bit of color shading on both of them together. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect. Now, the guy who's doing this is doing it for very little money because I have very little money to pay him. But he got Davenport perfect. When I first saw this, I just sent him an email with like 60 exclamation points. I said, "You've done it, you know. You've done it. That's Davenport. That's him. That's the guy." What I cut out of there is he did a first pass on Mace who looked nothing like Mace. So he's working on Mace now. I've given him as a test project. I'd like to eventually do the entire 6-minute interview, which is a fair amount of rendering time. But as a test project, I took 50 seconds of the interview, and the 50 seconds of the interview start with Davenport, where Davenport says, "Yeah," and my call sign is Sparks, and then you go to Gordo, and Gordo says, "Yeah, just don't call him Sparky," and May says, "Yeah, don't call him Sparky," and you go back to Davenport, then you go to Sinclair, then you go to the woman who's doing the questioning. So there's about a 40-second picture that's got all 5 of the characters. And that's the goal of the first proof of concept test. And then depending on how that goes, we might do the whole 6 minutes just to blow people away. If one of the things is he's a little bit over animated in the face, and that's because I overperformed the metahuman character. All of that was me, by the way. I mean, that was my performance. It was my voice too. And I made it a little bit over expressionally like that because the tracking on the metahumans isn't quite as good as the normal eyeball. But if I take it back down to normal levels, then he won't look quite so over animated. Just a little bit too jumpy, just a bit. But when I saw this, I thought, okay, now it's done. Now, the reason you saw that halo around there is because that is actually being glued over the image by the computer. It's gluing a frame by frame AI face over the metahuman face and matching the metahuman expressions on a frame by frame basis. So basically, what this guy had to do was he had to build Davenport. He had to go in there and train the computer to create this virtual actor who you just saw. Now, I've got a conference call set up with him. I actually sent him an email about this a week ago, talking about liking to do a conference call and understanding the process a little better, and I forgot to click send. But I sent it earlier today, so I might be talking with him tomorrow. My understanding is that once he has the Davenport character trained, then he can just apply it to Davenport every time you see Davenport. So if that's the case, and I think that is the case, then there's a lot of work in the beginning to train the AI to recognize this algorithm. This is the algorithm for Davenport. This is what you do with his nose, this is the face, this is the eyes. And then you just match it to whatever the metahuman's doing. But if that's the case, and I believe it is the case, then what he's working on now is he's building the Gordon, he's building the Sinclair, he's building the Mace and the interviewer girl. And if my understanding is correct, once that's done, then rendering the entire 6-minute interview is just processor time, and processor time is really, really cheap. He's spending a lot of labor on it right now, but if it turns out that basically for this test we've got Mace Mattingly, we've got the 4 astronauts and a woman, then we're good. Marusha Dark is 30 minutes late. I'm going to have to run them one more time just for Marusha because it just Marusha is such a regular here, and I want to see them one more time. So anyway, I'll play them one more time. Just imagine that the color, is not so, skin color is not so dark, and that there's a filter that's sort of a color and maybe a little bit of grain that's applied to everything, so the face and the background just look indistinguishable. But I'm just going to run them one more time for both sides, mostly because I want to see them again. I just think they look just really, really cool. So here is a 2-second test of AI deep faking over a metahuman character. So I got to do these one at a time. We'll start over here. Hang 1 second there, Lapco. We'll start on YouTube. Oh, I got to switch and come back. Hang on. Oh, no, I guess not. It didn't work. There we go. Here we go. Yeah. Come on. There we go. Yeah, I saw that, and I just said, "You did it, man. That's Davenport. That's him. That's the actor I would have cast for him." And he built him. He found the hair, and then he found the eyes, and found the nose, and found everything. He just built him. We got a super chat here from from Lapco. Stoked for AI is going to be in 2 years when the Epstein tapes drop, and the instances of all my favorite celebs doing the unspeakable to minors can be proven by Intel officials to have all the hallmarks of rusky AI fakes. Yeah, well, we're a long way from AI being able to be unfakeable. It's certainly already good enough to be to convince regular people, and I mean regular people like me. But when you get into analysis on a pixel by pixel basis in terms of really forensically going after whether an image is AI generated or not, it's still pretty obvious, I think, who's doing that. So anyway, I'm hoping by next week to have that 40 seconds of all 5 characters. I can't wait to see the other 3 guys plus the woman, and it's enough to make me want to just drop everything else and just get on this colonies thing, because this is I'd certainly get on the Mace Mattingly thing, because the Mace Mattingly thing will be ready to go, and it'll look real. I asked him if there was a filter that does that is there an AI filter that you can apply to scenes to make buildings and landscapes and interiors in CGI look pretty real. He said, no, not really. But there's one final thing to add to this. Taffy 3 movie. By the way, Sad Wings asked about the Taffy 3 movie. For those of you, again, who are new, that's very few of you here watching, but one of the most remarkable days in world history, in terms of military history anyway, was October 25th, 1944, when Task Force 3, called Taffy 3, of 4 destroyers, 2 destroyer escorts, went and took on the largest, most powerful surface battle fleet ever. The Japanese super battleship Yamato was there. They brought another 6 battleships, heavy cruisers, destroyers, and the small group of Americans went and fought them off and allowed the carriers to escape, or most of them anyway. It was one of the most amazing acts of heroism in history, and one of my favorite stories. So the Taffy 3 story is actually much simpler to tell than the colonies or even a major Mace Mattingly stretch, because it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The Taffy 3 story is easy to tell in terms of the ship-to-ship stuff, because ships are hard body. We've got excellent water simulations now. We've got excellent gunshot, cannons firing and stuff. And so from a strategic point of view, this ship does this ship does that point of view, Taffy 3 could be done in Unreal Engine now. The problem with Taffy 3 was, how do you get the expressions of the people, because it's about the people? Well, now there's only, that I'm aware of, only 2 or 3 extant photos of Ernest Evans, the captain of USS Johnston, which was probably the single most heroic ship in a group of heroic ships. So 4 ships actually went back and fought the Japanese, and Johnston was the first. But Ernest Evans, there are photographs of him, but Ernest Evans can be used, the photographs of Ernest Evans can be used to create a virtual Ernest Evans that is indistinguishable from Ernest Evans. I don't have to get an actor who looks like him. I can get him. I can get his face. And that's so important to me, you know, to the history. We got pictures of Bob Hagen. We got pictures of Copeland, and so that Taffy 3 as an engaging half-hour documentary is, this process works. So we're already at the point where we can pretty much do that. To tell Taffy 3 as a feature film would take a little more money because you've got some backstory to tell, but basically, you know, there's definitely 90 minutes of material there. It's not a romance story. It's not a, you know, it's a, I saw Greyhound. Greyhound, I thought the CGI in Greyhound was believable. It looked a little CGE to me, just a bit, but it was a feature film with Tom Hanks, and I liked the movie. The problem with Greyhound was that they didn't feel like there was a movie there. I didn't get there was no arc on Greyhound. That's why it didn't feel like a real film to me. I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was a great movie. But what they did with Greyhound was they filmed inside an actual Fletcher-class destroyer. By happy coincidence, the ship in Greyhound was the exact same class of destroyer as the lead ship in the Taffy 3 story, which is a Fletcher-class destroyer. Now, what's especially interesting is, and I didn't know this until very recently, I took another look back into the Taffy 3 thing just a few weeks ago. I had heard about during Taffy 3 that the Americans would duck into like rain squalls to hide, to get away from these artillery shells that were raining down all over them. But for some reason, I always thought it was kind of a sunny day because in Florida, it's a sunny day, and then this wall of water just marches down the street. In Florida, when it would rain in the summertime, that rain curtain was so definitive that we could ride our bikes in and out of the rain. I've done that a number of times. In Florida, when a rain cloud comes over, it drops a curtain of water that is so discreet that it doesn't just slowly start raining. It's just like if you're fast enough, you can ride your bike in and out of it. So what I discovered, and a bit to my disappointment, I have to say, was that the actual day was overcast, was a pretty heavily overcast day. Wasn't North Atlantic rough or anything, but it didn't have that kind of, you know, Pacific blue quality that I always kind of envisioned when I saw the thing in my mind. But look, it makes the ships look more ominous, and even then, it's the Pacific, the Southern Pacific waters just don't look anything like the North Atlantic. So I've seen, there's a guy out there, a Japanese guy, who does just nothing but battleships, warships, I should say, and they look fantastic. He's got perfect Fletcher class. You've got perfect Yamatos. He's got perfect Japanese destroyers. They just go sailing through the frame. They look absolutely fantastic. So, you know, you're talking about doing all these things by Hollywood standards, a micro budget. But let's take another example, a really terrible example, a movie that I thought I would have been first in line to see at theaters, and I had no interest of it. I finally saw it late at night at home because it just was so disappointing, the clips from it, and that's Midway, which came out 2-3 years ago now, I guess. That movie was so overblown, was so video game over the top, that I had no desire to see it. I mean, they have these guys pulling up out of their dive bombing runs, and as he pulls out, he's so low he dips a wingtip in the water. Well, I've seen what happens when planes dip wingtips in the water, and they don't just skim through the water and go flying back off again. The second that wing touches the water, that's the end of that. And when they're making their dive bombing runs through the flak, it's like they're going through a nebula cloud. Oh, it's 5 years now, 2019. Good Lord. I looked at. I remember watching these trailers and clips on YouTube from Midway and thinking, so what they actually accomplished wasn't dramatic enough. You have to turn this into a Call of Duty cutscene. I mean, you literally have to have like Japanese Zeros just exploding and flying through the wreckage, and just really. So, it was really bad movie, and I mean really bad movie. Pearl Harbor was a bad movie, and I just, I was so disappointed when I think about how much money they had. With the money they had, I could have done the entire Pacific War. I could have done 5-6 movies on the Pacific War with the money that they wasted on Midway, because the thing was not a success, as I recall. No, not the Henry Fonda one with Robert Mitchum. That came out, I want to say, in the 77, 78, somewhere in there. That movie came out a few years after Tora Tora Tora, which was done with real airplanes, although they used Texans for Zeros, if I remember correctly. There are very few flying. There may only be one flying authentic Japanese Zero today, but it was just garbage, garbage. And 76, that sounds right. And these historical things are so good. But anyway, this test that you just saw convinced me that desktop feature filmmaking is feasible without apologies. Like, yeah, they look pretty close to human. It's like, no, there's no way to tell that they're not real people. And there you go. Scaled Deck says, have you read Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by Hornfisher? It's what got me started on the whole Taffy 3 thing, and I had pitched doing the Navy to Daily Wire, but they passed on it a couple times now. I wanted to do the story of the Navy in the Pacific. I still want to do it. Maybe we'll crowdfund that thing and we'll just do it for, we'll just do it through BillWhittle.com and we'll just put it out there and let everybody see it, and we'll try to monetize it on homeschooling market. But if it's crowdsourced, the nice thing about crowdsourcing is you don't have to monetize it. The film's already paid for. The distribution doesn't matter if you can crowdsource something. But crowdsourcing, the golden days of crowdsourcing are well behind us, and the key to crowdsourcing is getting people to the theater, to the page. You need to be able to drive large numbers of people there, so that the percentage that you capture is that. But look, man, Star Citizen has raised $700 million for a game that still doesn't work. And I've been watching. I played Star Citizen very intensely for 2 years. Had a lot of fun with it, and I've been keeping up with it over the years. Just on and off, watching it, and the problem with Star Citizen is, one of the many problems with Star Citizen is, they've been working on the game for over 10 years now. And the graphics that look so phenomenal, the computer graphics that look so phenomenal in 2013, are starting to look a little passé in 2024. Sorry about this. I usually have this silenced. It will be silent. So, here's where we are with that. Early access for 10 years now. It's an alpha. So in the not too distant future, I'm hoping by next Monday we should have that. I'm hoping we have that 40-second bit, which would really give you a chance to sink your teeth into it and really have a look at it. And I'm trying to explain to this guy who's trying to do this for computer games. He's trying to use this technology to make the computer game characters look photoreal. I'm trying to explain to him that he's on the, if he can take metahuman characters and deep fake face so that they look like the characters in the game, so that the director gets to cast the movie the way he wants to, then that's great. Now, not to get too deep in the weeds, but there's one other way to do this, which is certainly easier for the guy. In order to make Davenport, he had to go in and find the right hair. He had to find the right eyes, the right nose, the right everything. He had to train this thing. What would have been much easier for him would be for me to hire, doesn't even have to be an actor, frankly, it could be a model, who I want to play Davenport. And then you just go in and photograph this guy from 500 different angles with all these different expressions. And then that just becomes your guy. And maybe that's how we'll do the colonies. Maybe we'll just go out and hire the people who we want. That's a beautiful thing about it. If it turns out they're good actors, you can hire the actors to do the motion capture and the facial capture. But you can hire a 60-year-old actor to play a 20-year-old character, because it's just taking facial data that captures the expressions, and then you're going to map that onto computer-generated characters, put those computer-generated characters into the CG world, and then glue the faces on top of them. That's probably the best way to think about it. One final issue on this, which may sound a little tough for some people to understand, but it's a real tough problem to crack. And I spoke with this guy about this, and once we get the first test done, the next tech challenge will be this: what do you do? What do you do with the problem of a character wearing a space helmet? So let's say I've already done this. Let's say I take what you just saw, Davenport, in the CG Davenport, the metahuman Davenport, and you put him in a space helmet. Looks perfect. It's a CG character inside a CG space helmet. The Unreal Engine is calculating the way the light hits the face, reflecting that through the lens. It's taking some of the intensity down because it has to go through the plexiglass before it gets to the camera, and then it's also calculating the shine on the helmet and the reflections on the helmet. And every time he moves his head, it's recalculating all the lights, so the reflections on the helmet look like glass, and it's perfect. But the face is the top layer, so the face actually gets glued on over the helmet. So how do you do that? You can have the face just get attached to the part of the face that's visible through the helmet, but the visor, it sits on top of the reflections of the visor. So how do you do that? That's a real problem. And the closest thing I can think of is to render the scene. Let's say they're out on the moon. Stay with me on this, just because it's the last of the. Then we'll get into the questions. But let's say you got an astronaut on the moon, and you want to do this process. You got Davenport, who you just saw, except he's in a spacesuit out on the moon. If I render Davenport as a metahuman, put the helmet on him, and just render a scene of him walking around looking at the moon, you see the reflection of the moon. His face is inside the helmet. All the reflections work great. When you put the AI face on top of that, it sits over the reflections of the helmet. It's a layer that's on top of that. So I think the way to do it is you render it where you've got Davenport on the moon, he's wearing the helmet, but you don't render the visor. So that it's just Davenport with an open face helmet. He's looking around, doing all this other stuff, right? Okay, great. So you render the level of Davenport without the visor. Okay. Then you put the AI face of Davenport over that. Great. Now you got a realistic looking human on the moon without a visor. And then I think the only thing you can do after that is you have to finally do a render pass that's just the visor. You just render the visor. And then you glue the visor on top of the top layer, which provides the reflections, and I think that would actually do it. I think that would actually do it. Systems. We're talking about desktop filmmaking, feature filmmaking using metahuman characters from Unreal Engine 3, and using AI, something like AI deepfake technology to make those computer game-looking characters photorealistic humans, and then there's a problem of how you get reflections on top of that. But I think that would actually do it. Anyway, hope to have some more to show you by next time, but I've been sitting on this for 3 weeks now, and I couldn't hold it any longer. In fact, I'm going to show it one more time, and just because I want to see it one last time, and then that'll do it. Honestly, I promise. So one last time, just for giggles. There we go. And here we go. They even caught the scar on his chin. It's awesome. Hooray. Okay. Let's see what we got for questions for tonight here, because it's been a while since we've done some questions on our Stratosphere Studio show. It's exciting time. Exciting time. See you later, Sadwings. Just logging in now. Here we go. Hey, thanks, Systems. It's cool to hear that you liked it. It's the first 2 seconds of a process that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but it's a night and day difference. Night and day. Come on, you can do it, Bill. Here we go. Stretch this out a little bit. Looks like I'm going to be doing a speaking event in Texas in a couple of weeks. I'll try to post that in advance for a change, and anybody who's in the neighborhood can come out and see it. I don't even know where in Texas it is, to be honest with you. I don't know which airport I'm flying into, but I'm looking forward to doing it. So, okay, so we got TSS questions for 12/9, which would have been yesterday, but we had to postpone a day. I was once again inside the rotating magnetic field, and couldn't get back in time. So let's see what we got here. And thank you to Marisha Dark for this. I'm not sure if it's Dallas or not, dude. It's nice to call a guy dude whose name is actually Dude. All right, so here we go. Let's start off with Eric Blake, who often gets the short end of the stick for whatever reasons. It's tough being a regular around here. Let me peel these questions off so I can still get a look at the comment stream as much as possible. Okay, that fixed itself. That's kind of interesting how that happened. Over there. You go there, and then you come over here-ish. That should be close, I guess. Last little adjustment here. Got 9 windows open and trying to get all these things going. All right, here we go. So, Bill, as you know, there's a tendency amongst the intellectual elite to poo-poo and beride the existence of movie sequels. Of course, it's true that oftentimes sequels are indeed just cash grabs, but oftentimes far from it. See Godfather Part 2, The Empire Strikes Back, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Aliens, etc. I agree. All of those movies, with possible exception of The Godfather, clearly the second movie was the better one. On that note, what's a sequel that could have happened, didn't happen, and in your expert opinion should have happened, and why is it Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League? Well, one movie that should have had a sequel, I think, was Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. I think that they should have made Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League. Buckaroo Banzai is not a movie that everybody's seen. You've either seen it or you haven't. If you have seen it and you're a kind of a tech nerd and a movie nerd and just a nerd in general, I never met anybody who was a sci-fi nerd who didn't just adore that movie. I love it. And it would have been nice to see a second one. Not to put too fine a point on things, but given the technology that I just spent the last hour and 10 minutes talking about, we could make Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League. We would just basically train the computer on what Buckaroo Banzai looked back in, was it 1986, 87, 88, something like that for that movie. We just basically train him on Peter Weller and the rest of the Hong Kong Cavaliers, and you could go ahead and make that movie. You just get a guy who dresses in the suit, who's about the same size as Peter Weller, a guy who can act, and you make the movie, and then you slap the deepfake onto the face, and that's exactly how they did Star Trek. Is it Unification? Was that the name of the short they did where Shatner shows up? It was nice that they had Shatner to do the acting, but it could have been anybody. It was really cool seeing James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise in his gold velour jacket in 4K high def. That was my favorite part of it, was seeing Kirk at something other than, NTSC 640 by 480. So that was cool. Why not get the actual Peter Weller and de-age him? He'd probably cost a little more money, but yes, that would be, de-aging him it just works just great. I did not see the last Indiana Jones movie, although I did see clips of it, and it looked like the flashback scene in the beginning looked really pretty good. And this technology improves by the hour. So de-aging is pretty cool. I'm sure you could get Peter Weller to do it. I bet you could, The problem is that you'd have to buy the rights. But in any event, I think if you went to Peter Weller and told him you want to do a sequel of Buckaroo Banzai, he'd probably laugh at you. But if you told him, no, we want to do a sequel of Buckaroo Banzai that takes place 2 years after Across the Eighth Dimension, he might go for that. I don't want to do a sequel of Buckaroo Banzai with Peter Weller looking like the way he does now. Not that there's anything wrong with how Peter Weller looks. It's not Buckaroo. That's Buckaroo. And so obviously there's that. Back to Eric's question. I'll give it some more thought in a second here. On that note, Bill, what's a sequel that could have happened, didn't happen, and your expert should have happened? No, you're right. I should send my stuff to Hegseth instead of Daily Wire. Yeah, imagine the actual U.S. Navy paying to make the Navy. Be good if I could talk to him. He would certainly get it. That would be considered recruiting material. Absolutely. I know some people who know people. And Hegseth seems like the kind of guy who would take an offbeat call, although I imagine he's a little busy right at the moment. I don't know if I can think of any sequels that really needed to be made. Usually when a movie is perfect, you don't want to make a sequel of it. You just want to leave it alone. I think the number one unmade movie out there right now used to be Childhood's End. I saw a version of Childhood's End they finally made, which wasn't super impressive. But I'll tell you what, really, if I could remake one feature film, it would be Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet really needs a remake. Because Forbidden Planet is just it's a brilliant brilliant movie idea. It's got a tremendous plot twist. It's got a romance arc. It's got a story arc. And it's visually stunning. Forbidden Planet would be, if you haven't seen it, it's a great film. There's so much of Star Trek in Forbidden Planet. The uniforms, they've got something that looks like the transporter beams, which are stasis fields. They've got phasers, it's tremendous. I just thought Forbidden Planet was a terrific movie that needed to be remade, and I just loved it. And I think there's been 2 attempts to remake Lost in Space. Now I know 3. They did a movie remake, then they did a TV show remake, and I think there's another TV show remake which may still be on or whatever. None of it captures Lost in Space, probably because it's all so woke. It's like, oh, Maureen Robinson's going to go fly and kick the monster and all the rest of it. But there was a quality to before Lost in Space. The Lost in Space first season is actually pretty good science fiction. Dr. Smith is a bad guy. He's a villain. He's not a drag queen in the Hollywood parade. He's an actual villain, and in the first 5, 6, 7 episodes of the first season, the black and white season, when they're riding that rover over the planet, and the planet's in this elliptical orbit, and the weather's changing and stuff. It's just really cool. It's really, really cool. And the idea of my favorite part of Lost in Space is without question, the only part of Lost in Space that just really has the hook in me is the Jupiter 2. And how you have such an iconic spaceship and then do everything you can to make sure you don't reproduce it is beyond me. That piece of poop that they used in the movie version of the Jupiter 2, this shapeless, bland, unmemorable thing. The saucer. There's been some just obviously off the beaten track, but that's how the show runs. People have taken a look at the robot, obviously Roadrunner. There was a company that was making mass-producing life-size B9 robot models. They're perfect, and they made about 25 of them. And then there's a whole B9 Builders Club where people build them from scratch. But there are some that are out there. There's probably 20 of them out there that are perfect. The key fob, that's exactly what it looked like. That's great, Dave. In the movie, the Jupiter 2 looked like the key fob. Just hideous. But people have done not even an architectural analysis. They've done a geometric analysis of both the Enterprise and the Jupiter 2, and both of those ships, whether intentionally or just through, it's clearly not an accident, but both of those ships have geometric, classical geometric form, the way the nacelles line up with the top of the dome and the angles and it's just many of these things follow the golden ratio. The Jupiter 2 had a curved dome that then came down at a steeper angle. Looked nothing like the set that they had on the ground, which is probably 3 times smaller than the Jupiter 2 would have had to have been. But the Jupiter 2 saucer it's perfect. It just take your breath away. It's so perfect. There was a short that's been on YouTube for 12, 15 years now, called the Science Fiction Air Show, and it's like an air show, except instead of rows of airplanes, there's rows of ships from science fiction thing, and the whole thing is about like the Jupiter 2 sitting on a tarmac someplace, and family members going up there and touring the inside and poking around, and it's just absolutely epic. It's phenomenal. So I would like to see a good version of that movie done, but no one takes it seriously. They all just kind of, I think it's just sort of a camp issue for them. But Forbidden Planet is the only thing that really comes to mind, Eric, and Forbidden Planet really needs it, because Forbidden Planet is a monster of a movie. Just a great film. And I sure do miss Leslie Nielsen. I miss him a lot. I thought he was great. Might have a sneeze coming on here. From Capital G Geek. Let me just see how many we got here. We got Capital G Geek, John Higgins, Marusha, Jacob, Roadrunner. Okay, easily. Bill, greetings from the swamps of Northern Virginia. Greetings back, and I've marched through some of those swamps, doing a look at the whole Eastern Theater Civil War battlefields. Beautiful, beautiful country up there. Have you read the Honor Harrington series by David Weber? I have not. If not, I would recommend it. It's similar to the Hornblower series, but set in a far future. The main adversary is collectivists, the space battles are realistic, and the physics is plausible, and it's a great story. Are there any others that you would recommend, either books or movies? Also, back in the day, you did a firewall on the power of iconography. I remember that one very well. It was an afterburner, actually. Care to comment on the current trend of taking well-known brand logos and turning them into kindergarten renderings? Looking specifically at Jaguar, here's the evolution of their logo, and here's their logo now. Yeah, probably lose my channel over this. Somebody took so for those of you who haven't seen the new Jaguar ad, they took space aliens and had them come out in bright yellows and reds and oranges, and they're just a bunch of comically diverse freaks doing weird motions and swinging sledgehammers and painting out the lens with white paint. It just destroyed their brand. It's Bud Light all over again. They just completely destroyed this iconic, cool brand. And Jaguar logo was a jumping cat and had a pretty cool looking iconography for the lettering, the font, and everything. And they turned it into something really, really soft with like small rounded letter A, and then a capital G, which was so shocking because they put a capital G in the middle of these small little rounded letters, and it looks like, frankly, a tampon brand. And somebody took the new Jaguar logo and replaced the front J with an F, and so it was Faguar, and man. Who's softened their logo, and I noticed this, and I don't like it at all, is Alaska Airlines. Alaska Airlines had that really cool, sharp calligraphy logo, and it had little like rough edges around it, and then the K was just real distinctive and real sharp. Alaska softened that up. They softened up the Eskimo too. It was too bold, They just nerfed it. That's the perfect expression for it. They nerfed it. For those of you not computer gamers, when you let's say you have a weapon, a gun in a game, and if the gun is overpowered, it's just this particular gun is too deadly, then the developers can go in and they can turn down the amount of damage it does. So they would say they nerfed the gun. They turned it into foam rubber. And the opposite of nerfing is buffing. So if you got a gun that's a little weak, you can buff it. Yeah, they nerfed the logo. They've nerfed a lot of logos. They turn them into pablum. They just get less and less interesting. Somebody, I don't want to get too deep into this, but somebody talked about this current art form with the big heads and the round hands, that all corporate media is using. It's just horrible. It's just it's painful to look at. Painful. Characters with like no eyes or little dots, and you just got the beard and the man bun, and it's just like, it's like, God almighty, it's just pathetic. Please just make it stop. Somebody make it stop. But But I haven't read Honor Harrington, and I'm a little backed up on things, so it'll be a while before I get to that. But yes, Jaguar went and destroyed themselves, and they had to destroy themselves because their new car looks like a. It's just, and by the way, it's the same. It's the same thing. They did it for the same reason that Bud Light did. Bud Light sales were declining. Jaguar sales were declining steeply. Army recruiting was declining. So in all three cases, they said, well, that's because the audience is changing, and so we have to appeal to a younger audience, so we're going to wokeify the brand. The only way to save the brand is to woke it. Turns out that your audience that you've still held on to is the opposite of woke in all three cases. Jaguar is a manly, masculine sports car. Bud Light was the beer drinking, just regular American guy at a football game beer, and the Army would get people who wanted to go to war and kill bad guys. So what they did in all three cases was they did a new Coke thing, and not only did they not capture a new audience, they lost their old one. And they're getting very good at this now, this brand destruction. Gillette is what started Jeremy's. No, it wasn't Gillette. It was Harry's razors, I guess, that got Jeremy's razors going. And now he's got Jeremy's chocolates. That boy's probably, I bet you he's 1,000 air by now. No, I've seen it, and it's time to go in the other direction. And I get the sense, by the way, I had the sense prior to the 2024 election. That's why I felt fairly good about the 2024 election until during our live coverage, I felt good all the way going into it until somewhere after another 3 hours of waiting, like in 2020 before they stopped counting for the night, but before they finally called the election. And Barack Obama was starting to say things like, "Oh, we're not going to know we've just heard from Barack Obama, who says that the results of the election will not be in tonight. It may not be in for several days, if not weeks." I thought, oh, okay. Turned out that didn't happen for reasons that we'll talk about on Thursday night if somebody wants to ask about it. But we've been over that ground a lot before. In any event, the culture is definitely changing. Steve's right angle that we shot this morning. I've already put Scott's up. Steve's right angle that we shot this morning was, I'm gonna call one of our presidents is missing. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He's making deals. He's making phone calls. He's calling Mexico. He's talking to Justin Trudeau. He's having a little mini summit down at Mar-a-Lago, and Donald Trump. It's still 40 days out or something, and Donald Trump is the president of the United States. And hooray! But there's this sense of a. I mean, MSNBC is going to be gone. The mainstream media is over as a force. They spent $1 billion on advertising, $1.5 billion, and had no effect whatsoever. Joe Rogan's podcast did far more for Donald Trump than all of his campaign ads put together, including for me. I was, needless to say, not only was I going to vote for the guy, but been defending him and supporting him for 8 years now. But even I watched the Joe Rogan podcast and was very impressed by how there was nothing new in terms of what he was bringing to the table, but he was so much less bombastic and just much more real. This is a much, much better Donald Trump than in 2016 or 2020. Andrew DeLay, I just caught it. The text is a little small for me in the YouTube chat. Andrew DeLay says, we're going to go to donate to get Scott housed again. Scott often watches these shows. So Scotty, I don't know. Maybe you can set up a PayPal link. We'll get you we'll get you in off the sidewalk, pal. Get you to a barber. I thought the close crop beard looked really good, but the man is the man, and he's entitled to his own look, and he's sticking to it. Anyway, you get you get the idea. So anyway, yeah, the logo is terrible, and the brand destruction is terrible, and they're going to keep doing it until they realize. One of the many things to love about Pete Hegseth was when he said, and as far as recruiting goes, just get the guy who made Maverick and have him do the commercials. It's like, see how simple it is. Nothing to it. It's that's exactly what you do. You get the guy who made Maverick. You get people who want to fight in the military. It's a radical idea. So anyway, there that is. Moving on, John Higgins. Evening, Bill. Hey, John. Hope everything's going okay for you. If you die under the knife to get out of 1, 2, 3 discussions, I'll never forgive you. I've been giving it serious consideration. I haven't had the results back yet, but we'll find out soon enough, I guess. Some backstory on that film. It was started in Berlin, and the Berlin Wall went up while they were shooting that movie, so they moved the production to Munich. It's a great look at Cold War propaganda and something I thought you'd enjoy, but I also love to hear what your wife thinks of it being raised on the other side. Okay. I think Billy Wilder meant for it to be a bit of a dig at both communism and capitalism, but it's definitely lived on as more an anti-communist. It's a bit silly, but it has some amazing no-nonsense businessman dialogue dumps by Cagney. Since you did your terror series, I was shocked you'd never heard about it and thought it would be right up your alley. You've had it since February, but I've enjoyed nagging you about it and figured you'd get to it eventually. Thanks for the many evenings of banter. You're a bit of a procrastinator, but a good man nonetheless. Thank you very much, John Higgins. And the entire thing is the availability of the DVD player. Hang on a second, because I promised you I would do this. Just hang on a second. Probably has to be plugged in. Oh, how quaint. Play 1, 2, 3. No, Billy, it's a USB device. Oh, sorry. Play 1, 2, 3. I'll put it here on my desk. I'm going to be in tomorrow all day. That'll be my reminder. So anyway, thank you. As another aside, since you're into video editing, search YouTube for Hell's Club 3. Someone made it during COVID lockdown. They edited a ton of movie footage from dozens of films into coherent narrative. It's more impressive than Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid in that respect, and it's truly astonishing. Hell's Club 3. I'll do it now. If I don't do it now, it doesn't get done. That's my mantra, and I'm sticking to it. Hell's Club 3, The Rise of Darkness. Movie mashups. Is it mashups or mashes up? Uh-huh. Yeah, it's very clever. I can tell already. Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks. I'll play it in the background somewhere, hopefully. Thank you very much for that, and I appreciate it. Always appreciate these references. By the way, I was just kidding you. I did see. I finally did get to watch 1, 2, 3, and you know what I like about it? I think my favorite thing about the movie is it's a great look at Cold War propaganda. I think Billy Wilder probably meant for it to be kind of a dig at both capitalism and communism, but it's definitely comes off as more anti-communist. It's a bit silly, but it's still got some amazing lines from Cagney, and and I just enjoyed the living daylights out of it. So thank you very much. I'm putting this on top of the DVD player. I owe it to you, buddy, and thank you for being so generous about it. If I'd had a DVD player built into the machine, which has been quite a while since that happened, I would have just the second I got it, I would have put it in and played it. I just had to get the DVD. I had to go buy one, and then I had to bring it home, and I had it at home for 6 months, and then I had to, bring it in here, and then it wouldn't play on the Apple. I had to plug it into the PC, and one damn thing after another. But I think I can get it to work on the new Apple. That should work. So I'll see if I can get a look at it tomorrow. But thank you again for the DVD and for being such a sport about the whole thing. If I do get to watch it, then we won't have anything left to talk about. My revenues will dry up. Okay. Rusha Dark, topic, Passengers. Bill, I was wondering if you've seen the movie Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. I haven't, but I know the basic plot. Without spoiling too much, about a group of humans who go off on a 120-year journey to colonize a world called Homestead 2. The two of the passengers wake up 90 years too early and are effectively stranded. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I heard it was good. The spaceship's interesting looking with that helical. Thank you, Lapco. Design looked kind of interesting. Whereas if you have, I was curious to hear what you think about the writing, the CGI, the ship design. No, I often get ahead of even the question, as well as their treatment of things like AI and interstellar travel, since I know these are topics that you put a lot of thought into with respect to the colonies. I know you said you don't want to be influenced by other people's material, but maybe there are things that either work or you can use or which don't work and you feel you could improve on. Let me just wrap up here. P.S. Glad you liked Godzilla -1. Loved it. Still recommend The Circle, especially given your recent remarks about Tom Hanks. Also, maybe you can stream a watch party of 1, 2, 3, and we can all enjoy it together if life goes up for it. That's a thought. I might get a serious. Well, I would certainly get a serious strike on that. On YouTube, but I'll just watch it myself. And it's getting to be, the molehill that Sir Edmund Hillary once looked at and said, because it's there. Why am I watching? Why to buy a DVD player and go out to watch 1 through 3? Well, because it's there. It's gigantic. It's bigger than all of us. So there's that. Looking forward to getting in early tomorrow morning and not having anything particular to push out the door. So there's that. MST3K comments, that'd be fun. So moving on. As far as I haven't seen it, Marusha. What the thought that your question did sort of spark in me is that I spent a year when I was thinking about the colonies. I'm pretty sure I spent a full year on whether I needed some form of faster than light travel. I spent a year trying to figure out how you could write the story with slower than light travel, and I just couldn't do it because the travel times are, I have no problem with the tagline for the development of the colonies was no magic, and I had to use one piece of magic, and that is interstellar travel. I picked what I thought to be the most likely form of faster than light travel, which is kind of a Stargate wormhole, but it's point to point. It wouldn't be you can just open up a wormhole and then just come out someplace. You had to have a start point and an end point. They had to be pointed at each other. They had to generate insane amounts of energy for a fraction of a second and warp space from one point to another. So it's like if you're going to, the example of the flat plane, that's where you got these two things that are this far apart, and then you fold the paper so that they're this part apart. Well, if it was going to be doing that, and you had to have two magnets, so they got to go out slower than light to build the destination port. They don't just get free travel. They got to go out there slower than light. So, 7 years, 8 years to Alpha Centauri to put the Alpha Centauri gate there, and once the Alpha Centauri gate was there, then you could travel between the two. And I also set a limit on it that was much, much, much smaller than 4 light years, so that it might take 7 gates to get you to Alpha Centauri. It might take 25 gates to get you to, something that was 20 light years away, or 12 or something like that. And then that starts functioning like railroads, where there's no sense in building a 28 light year Stargate when you've got a 12 that goes over here and a 4 that goes over here and then a 9 that goes this way, and you get there that way. You know what I mean? So then you've got railroad lines that can be interdicted, and then they become battle lines, and and if you blow one of these things up, you basically cut off an entire system. It's the same as using a nuclear weapon, and so you've got it puts all of your warships in one place and does a lot of cool things in terms of helping the plot along. And that's what ultimately I surrendered to. I just couldn't tell the story where it took 8 years to get from one place to another, short distance, 10 years, 12, and then another 12 years to get the message back that you had arrived, and then another 12 years to wait for the message. I just couldn't, I just didn't know how to tell that story. Because you can't really tell that story about a character. It's you've done 2 things and the person ages out of the story. So we'll see. So anyway, I thought the design for the ship and passengers was okay. One of the things I've never seen done, and I mean to correct this in the colonies, is you saw this in Alien, the original Alien. You saw it in Passengers. Any of these, you saw it to some degree in Prometheus. When you're traveling slower than light, to give the impression that it's a 100-year journey, or whatever, the ship is just moving slowly along, And I would do it where the ship just goes, it's hauling ass. Thing's doing, 80%, 90% of the speed of light. You can get to 80% of the speed of light without too much trouble, in terms of relativistic problems. And that's just an engineering issue. That's just ISP, specific impulse. It's just finding a rich enough, hot enough energy source to get you enough energy to get up to that speed. 2001, great example. You'd see Discovery just hanging in space like that. People will buy this. You can show Discovery zipping by the camera, and then you can do a shot of Discovery stationary, and people will realize that you're moving with the Discovery, especially if you start from the inside. But I've actually wanted to, and it's possible to do this. I've wanted to see what a rendering would look like of a spacecraft, a big spacecraft passing you at 70 or 80% of the speed of light. I suspect that it would be a 2-frame animation. In fact, it may not even be a 2-frame animation. If you have a camera hanging in space, you can do the math on this. You can do this in Unreal Engine. Speed of light's 286,262 miles per second. So, yeah, it's a 1-frame animation. As if, and he said, if they could put a washing machine in outer space, our Billy could render it. Thank you for the Apollo 13 reference. That was great. So that's probably why they don't do it. But it would be, wouldn't it? Because it'd be like trying to catch a beam of light going past you. It's moving at 80% of the speed of light. That's essentially the speed of light. A photon will go around the Earth 7 times in a second. So it's just a 1-frame animation. It kind of gets your mind around it. But we're not dealing. You can't. You always have to sacrifice you always have to sacrifice for the story. So you could do a 16 frame animation where the thing just like for example, a great example is the opening credits of Star Trek the original series, where the Enterprise just goes. Shoo! It's like that ship is hauling ass. It's going probably, I don't know, 1% of 1% of the speed of light in the opening credits of Star Trek. But that's the first and only time. In fact, I think that might be the only time I can think of where you got the sense that, man, that thing is moving. Roddenberry was a genius. A genius. Eric Blake says, lest we forget, the reason Jules Verne used a massive cannon to launch a ship from Earth to Moon was he thought that a rocket that didn't blow up would be too magical. You put people in a cannon and shoot it at the moon, and what's going to arrive is going to be red paste at the bottom of the cannon shell. Thank you for the super chat, Lapko. I kept the faith. You're an honest man. I will do it, by gum. And then Lapko again. Space travel has always confused me simply because of microasteroids. A pebble going 26,000 miles per hour is impossible to track and going to pack a punch. Yeah, the good news is there's very few pebbles in space. Even a particle of dust at relativistic speeds is enough to take you out. That's why science fiction writers like Arthur C. Clarke had an enormous ice shield, just this huge, heavy liquid ice shield that was an ablative shield to knock out interstellar dust particles. They hit a pebble, it's all over. It's game over. There's that. Dave Big Booty brings up an interesting point here, which is something not many people consider. That is, if you're on a spaceship that could instantly go to the speed of light, the stars wouldn't move; they'd just shift blue. Let's just say what happened. Here's what's interesting about that. Most of the stars in the galaxy, the vast majority, 90% of the stars in the galaxy are M stars. They're red dwarfs. 90% of them. So when you look at the night sky, you're not seeing 90% of the stars that are out there because they're too dim to see. Red dwarfs are too dim to see. The light is very, very faint. If you start accelerating towards the center of the galaxy, the light shifts from red to blue, which means that all of these stars that are invisible because they're so dim in the red, well, I guess they'd just be low luminosity white. They would, but the universe should get brighter. All of these M stars would shift from the red to whites to blues, but then I realized that actually doesn't solve the problem because it's not a frequency problem, it's an intensity problem. Yeah, instead of having a bunch of red stars that were too faint to see, you'd have a bunch of little white stars that would be too faint to see. I thought for a minute when you accelerated, you'd get the universe would just like, whoa, look at all those stars. When I heard that before it was launched that the James Webb Space Telescope was an infrared telescope, I went, oh man, not an infrared telescope. I don't want to see an infrared telescope. It's near infrared, which is why when they take a look at a star field that the Hubble looks at, Webb sees so many more stars because it can see the red dwarfs. And Webb is amazing. We need to put a real observatory up there, a big one. I mean a big one. Starship could help with that because the problem is the diameter of the telescope. And the Starship, aside from being powerful, it's the one thing that Roadrunner says they prefer the term little red stars. One of the biggest advantages of Starship is not just that it's powerful, but that it's wide. I mean, if you think about it, you've got to fit everything that gets into space has to fit inside the cargo bay of the space shuttle, or has to fit inside the what is it, a 3-meter wide shroud on the top of the Falcon 9 or something. Starship can put big things up there, not just heavy things, and that's pretty cool. Infidel 42 says if you accelerate too fast, say 80% C, you'll be getting hit with X-rays. Yeah, then visible light gets blue shifted up into you're actually essentially you're compressing the frequency of the light, and then everything gets shifted into higher energy electromagnetic radiation, and some of that can be a problem. You don't want a whole bunch of X-rays, so you'd have to have shielding and all kinds of things. So there we go. All right, moving on. We got a Jacob Belchuk, and a Roadrunner, and then we're done. Hail Bill, what separates art from propaganda? My knee-jerk reaction to that excellent question is truth. But propaganda, well, I guess it depends on how you define propaganda. I mean, the best propaganda is based in truth, and I'm wondering if, like, if I do a glowing piece on the military, let's say I do the Navy, and I've got a dog in that hunt, you know. I'm on the side of the United States Navy, and I'm on the side of the United States in World War II, and I think I got plenty of justification for being on that side. But if I do something that basically, let's take an example that exists. I did the true story of the atomic bombs, where I talked about why it was not only necessary to drop the 2 atomic bombs, but that it was the morally correct thing to do. And it's a 16-minute argument. I'm not going to reproduce it now, but I felt like I did a really good job of making that case. So is the true story of the atomic bombs propaganda? Well, that depends on the definition. It's definitely presenting a viewpoint. I feel like I did what propaganda doesn't do, which is present the other point of view. Repeatedly throughout that piece, I said, now people were saying the Japanese were trying to surrender, but we know that they weren't trying to surrender because we did warn them. We dropped the LeMay circular on them, and they didn't surrender. Then we dropped an atomic bomb on them, and they didn't surrender. Then we dropped a second atomic bomb on them, and they still didn't surrender for 3 days. So this idea that they were trying to surrender is just nonsense. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on them, and we'd been monitoring the radio the whole time. It's not like we weren't listening. And it took them 3 days after the second bomb to actually surrender. So if they'd wanted to surrender prior to the dropping of the bomb, they could have surrendered by saying, we surrender. But they didn't do that. In fact, on the contrary, they were talking about how they were going to fight off the American invasion with bamboo spears and strapping explosives to the back of little children and training them how to run underneath tanks. Yeah, propagandists say that Japan surrendered because Russia declared war on them. Japan surrendered because there's one reason why Japan surrendered. This is the thing that I mentioned in the atomic bombs afterburner. But if I'd had it to do over again, which I think is nearly perfect work, mind you, I think I would have added one more sentence, and that would have been to drive the nail home. The atomic bombs gave the emperor the excuse he needed to surrender and save as much face as possible. It was all about face at that point. They all knew the war was over, and they all knew that they'd lost it. None of them, they had a 7-man council, and none of them could come to an agreement. They had to come to a unanimous agreement, and then the emperor would, generally speaking, virtually every time, approve what this war council came up with. And they could never agree to surrender. They were all into the whole Bushido, the whole broken jewels thing. Well, better to destroy the country than to surrender, and if we have to fight to the last man, then that's what we're going to do. And the atomic bombs gave Hirohito the fig leaf he needed to overrule his council and say, no, we're surrendering. There is no standing up against this weapon. It was a fig leaf. It was shade. It gave him cover. It gave him an excuse to surrender. So there you go. So I don't think that the atomic bomb thing was propaganda. Some propaganda posters are artistic, but I think just to take the two words in their most generalized sense, what's the difference between art and propaganda? Art is about the truth, and good art appeals to you because it's got some truth in it. Beauty and truth are connected to each other. When something is beautiful, it's beautiful because it's true. it's true on some level. A beautiful landscape, a beautiful portrait, it's got truth to it. And and that's an actual act. And Chase Smith just mentioned something that I was kind of getting around to, but he put it better than I did. So I was trying to get to the idea is that it's true. Propaganda, in its general definition, is designed to manipulate people. It's using selective truth to manipulate people. Art is not trying to manipulate people. Art is simply there for the sake of art. But Chase Smith put it much more succinctly. He said the difference between art and propaganda is motive. That's a very, very, very excellent definition. It's a perfect definition. It's motive. What are you doing it for? Are you doing it? Are you presenting something for its own for its own merit? Here, I've made something I think is beautiful. What do you think? Or hey, I've made something that is designed to evoke an emotional reaction that suits my political purposes. So I would say I don't see how I could possibly improve on that. The difference between art and propaganda is motive. Art shouldn't have any motive other than the artist's expression. Good art, I don't think there's been many exceptions to this rule. It goes back to the question about sequels, why there were some sequels that are very good, but most sequels are utter garbage. It's because of motive. When you look at the motive for Aliens and Godfather 2 and Empire Strikes Back, three great sequels that were arguably better than the originals, there was much of the story that was left untold, and the people that made the sequel said basically, our motive is to tell a story based on this first story. We think that this second story is as good or better story. We're inspired by the first story to tell the second story. Jaws 4, Superman 4, on the other hand, the motive is just to collect cash off of the franchise. And all of the Alien sequels since then, since Aliens, have been about cashing in. None of those stories, Aliens 3, 4, Prometheus, Covenant, and I haven't even seen Romulus. It's an Alien movie. It's been out for a year now, or 6 months or something. I haven't seen it. I have no desire to see Romulus. It's just they're just remaking Alien, and they're doing it for there's no story to tell. He had something really going there with Prometheus and Covenant. I thought the whole idea of the engineers and stuff, I thought that was really, really interesting stuff. I thought it was good. This is worth telling the story of. But he just dropped the ball. And I don't know that, is Romulus connected to Covenant and Prometheus? Are the engineers even in Romulus? It seems like Romulus is more of a, oh, here's an Alien movie we can make this year. It's like Alien versus Predator, as Eric Blake points out. Same thing. The first Alien versus Predator was an interesting crossover movie. Didn't really need to be made, but that was mostly just it was like watching Green Hornet and Batman together back in the '60s on the same show. But I mean, there's something that people are pointing out. Final Destination number 316, Fast and Furious 9000. There's something to be said about a franchise movie. Mission Impossible is a great example of that, where you've got a format that is fun. So Mission Impossible movies are basically heist movies, and people like heist movies. It's an elaborate plot to accomplish a goal. And heist movies are fun, so the Mission Impossible franchise is not great art, but get your action and you get to see Tom Cruise running with his hands held flat, and everybody likes to watch that. Bond is another great example. People just like the mechanics of a James Bond movie. It's like going back to see this. It's like watching another episode of Lost in Space. I like Lost in Space. I don't know what or Star Trek. I don't know what's going to happen this week on Star Trek, but I like the Enterprise, and I like McCoy and Scotty and Kirk and all of them. So let's see where they go this week. So there's nothing really wrong with serials. It's just that we're talking about sequels as opposed to serials. I consider Mission Impossible to be serials. I consider on Elm Street to be serials. It's the same movie again and again and again. But none of the Halloween X or Nightmare on Elm Street X are memorable. The only one that I remember about that is the first one of all of those series. So, there you go. Infidel 42 says, I think the motive behind Superman 4 was to end careers. You may be right about that. That certainly was the outcome. I miss Christopher Reeve. I really liked him. I thought he just struck me as a good guy. And I thought he dealt with his tragedy just with elegance and class well, I think he dealt with being paraplegic. I thought he dealt with it like Superman. I thought he lived up to his. I thought he did it heroically, genuinely heroically. Always had a smile on his face. Whenever he got wheeled out, he had a smile on his face, and he just struck me as a good man. And he is I think Henry Cavill's a terrific Superman. He deserves much better scripts than he's gotten. I didn't particularly like Man of Steel. I don't like any of the movies that he's been in, but he's a great Superman. He's definitely got it. But Reeves, Christopher Reeve, is it Christopher Reeve, right? And George Reeves, that weird coincidence. But Christopher Reeve made me cry. It's one thing to make you cheer and stuff, but and make you smile. But he made me cry. I mean, he just was so sweet. Just seemed like a really good guy, and he was great. And was it the time travel movie? Was it Once in Forever, something or other? Yeah, Christopher Reeve is Superman. Somewhere in Time. Yeah, that was a really interesting movie, and it was a really, really, really interesting time travel device. Those of you that didn't see it or don't remember it, he gets this picture of Jane Seymour, and he falls in love with this picture, but the picture is 70, 80 years old or something like that, and he decides he wants to go back in time to meet her, and the way he goes back in time is to convince himself he goes back in time, locks himself in a room, dresses up in period clothing, and stays in the room and convinces himself it's 1913, whatever the hell the year was or whatever it was. And he doesn't leave until he's completely convinced that he's actually, he doesn't have a time machine. He doesn't inject himself with a serum. He just, through this agonizing, that damn Penny is right. Through this agonizing process of days and weeks, it's like heroin withdrawal. He manages to convince himself that just through sheer force of will, he goes back in time. I thought that was really, really clever. And the twist in that movie, which has to do with that damn Penny, is mind-boggling. It's just really great. Great. Okay, so final question for the night from Roadrunner. Hey, Bill, greetings and salutations. Greeting and solicitations to you. Oh, great one. You may have already talked about this, so feel free to bypass this question. How goes the progress on your project, story mechanics, the colonies, Major Mace Mattingly, etc.? Your appreciative audience is anxiously waiting for the shows to be posted. The progress on, well, we talked about Mace Mattingly a lot today and the colonies a lot today. Story mechanics, I'm still basically just waiting to pull the trigger with that and trying to get that first interview done. Having a hell of a time getting this set to look the way it is, but that's mostly been me being a little preoccupied lately with a couple of other things. I have to tell you, the one thing that's on the bubble is things to come, because the mood of the country has changed so much. I held off on it because I thought, well, if Trump wins, it'll be a different version. But I'm just seeing so many things that I just didn't think were possible. Just just the idea of Pete Heggs as being considered as a possibility for Secretary of Defense just changes so much. This idea that, no, they really are going to deport these criminals. I mean, one of the precepts of things to come was that we're going to have to deal with this border crisis, and that we would have to, the problem in the cities. And it's like, no, it looks like these problems are being solved as we go. Roadrunner says we have a president now. Yeah, so things to come as a very dark kind of a thing. I had this realization on election night, and it ended up being that hot mic where I was like crying like a baby. I guess it was just all of this repressed, emotion for 4 years. But the thought occurred to me because this whole thing is about this cycle of civilizations and this existential crisis. And somewhere, when it was clear that Donald Trump had won, I thought that what if the crisis isn't coming? What if that was the end of the crisis? What if that was the win? In other words, the war, all of the social pathologies, all of the the Gen Z weakness, all of the brainwashing, all of the wokeness, it's all out there. We got to deal with that. All the cities, we've still got the work to do. But midway was where the war was won, and I think that the thing has been won. So the only show that's really on the bubble is things to come. I really feel like it's gonna I just don't know how I'm going to do that anymore. It's a product of a much darker time. As Fendi happily points out, this is Bill. I've told you this before. It takes a big man to cry. Of course, it takes an even bigger man to laugh at that first man for crying. It does. It's high sport. I just was so choked up at the realization, like, maybe this whole thing isn't coming. Maybe it's been here and we've been through it. I think I felt on the night of the election the way that Churchill felt, and my mom felt too, for that matter. She was, I can tell you exactly how old she was. She was 11 on December 7th, 1941. But my mom was living in foster home out in the countryside in England. She'd been in London when the Blitz started and been there during the first days of the German bombings during the Battle of Britain. They moved all the kids out to the countryside. They just put them on a train and somebody picked them up, and no background checks, nothing. They just picked you up. Here are your kids. You're going to watch them for a while, right home to let them know where you are. And this woman whom my mom ended up living with, this woman was a psychopath and had been nothing but a terrorizer to my mom. And nevertheless, the only time that woman ever showed any sense of warmth or consideration or kindness, my mom says that she was sleeping one night with my uncle Ted, who was her younger brother, a year younger. They were both sleeping in their bedroom in this house out in the country. And this lunatic woman who had been watching over them opened the door and woke him up and said, so this must have been shortly after Pearl Harbor, probably a day or two after, woke him up and said, America's in the war now, so we're going to be okay. And she just, how do you even tell that story without getting a little teary-eyed? It's like, yeah, America's finally in this, and so we're going to be okay. That's how I felt on election night, like the relief. I've been, I believed, and I still believe that the indisputable evidence that the 2020 election was fraudulent. The indisputable evidence, the only indisputable evidence there is that they stopped counting. They stopped counting in 5 key states. It's indisputable evidence. They just stopped counting. I thought they were going to stop counting in 2024. That's the only time I got nervous. But But I wanted to be wrong about that. I would much rather have believed that we'd lost fairly in 2020. Would have made the last 20 years much more manageable. The last 20 years, the last 4 years, it just felt like 20. I didn't think we'd be able to win again. And a lot of people felt the same way. Felt that we were cheated in 2020 and that they'd had 4 years to dig in. Turned out that I think that they did cheat in 2020. And if it turns out that they didn't, I'm still waiting for somebody to give me an explanation as to why they stopped counting over those 5 nights, why those jumps happened like that overnight, why the burst water main turned out not to be a burst water main, and all the rest of these things. Why this, what was it, 2,000 mules or whatever, 700 mules? Why? Just tell me why. Because I would like to be convinced that it was a fair loss, but I don't believe it was. And so when it turned out that we realized that the early voting and the get out the vote, and that the massive shift to the right in the country as a result of 4 years of Biden was enough to just plain overwhelm the system. I just was so relieved when they finally called it. I just thought, my God, turns out we still got the country. So now we'll find out and see what we can do to like I said, we got 2 years to fix it and lock the doors behind us. We got to fix it and then we got to lock the doors so that they can't just immediately jump in and unfix it. And that requires legislation that overrides and specifically overrides executive orders. They put somebody on the Election Integrity Commission. Who is that? Does anybody remember? It's one of his more recent announcements that there's going to be not only an investigation of the 2020 election, but a committee that's designed to basically make sure that we have fair elections. Look, not only am I not looking for a system to make sure that Republicans win all the time. I don't want Republicans to win all the time. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and I just want it just to be fair. I can deal with losing elections. I'm not going to say I have no problem with losing elections. I'm disappointed. But the system works, and the thing I'm defending and the thing I love, the United States of America, is functioning. You win elections, you lose elections. If you lose an election fairly, it's time to take a look at what you did wrong about your message. Either your message is wrong or you weren't effective at communicating it. Maybe you need to rethink your priorities, or if you're certain that you're right and that you're on the side of goodness and light, then you clearly need to improve your messaging. So I wouldn't have had a problem with losing in 2020 if I believe we lost fairly, but there was just so much wrong. Mostly the fact that 5 states just said go to bed, and when we woke up the next morning, oh yeah, no, we just yeah. If they hadn't stopped counting, I would have been fine. With 350 million people, there's always going to be individual cases of somebody sneaking ballots into this precinct and so on. You're never going to get away from that. That is not the same thing as something that can change the course of the election. So, Hell Knights 55 says, I want a system where no matter who wins, they have so little power it really doesn't matter. Now we're really on to the main vein there. That's a profoundly intelligent thing to say. I've maintained in a firewall or an afterburner, I don't remember which, the smartest thing we could do would be to pay every single member of the House of Representatives $1 million a year and every senator $5 million a year, and send them all to U.S. Virgin Islands and let them party down there and not come to work. That'd be the best money we could spend. Be about $1 billion, and that's it. Pay them big money to go we fly them down there at government expense, put them up at government expense in a 5-star hotel, bring their families and all their friends, and let all of them party, drink, and do what the hell they want to. Here's $1 million a year. Now just stay the hell out of Washington and stop making rules and regulations, and that would be the best government we could possibly have, and that's one that's perpetually on vacation. So there's that. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Studio. I'm glad you guys had the same reaction I did to the to that awesome little piece of tech work there. If we can get this problem solved, I need to talk with this guy about how permanent it is once you train a face. Is it trained? Because if that's the case, then it's just a matter of putting resources, at it, and so then we can see. And there's a lot of actors who I would like to use who are probably older than the roles that I would like them to play, but this technology is changing, and it's time for miracles. So we'll see. We will see. Okay, well, anyway, thanks very much for being here, everybody. It's great to see everyone again, and I'm sorry we had to push to Tuesday night, but we'll be back in 2 days on Thursday for the Stratosphere Lounge. For all our friends over at, wait a minute, where'd you go? There they are. For all our friends over on YouTube, thanks again for joining us. Thanks for the kind words, as always, the super chats and all the rest of it, and the support. And thanks especially to the members for making the show possible. So we'll see you Thursday night for the Stratosphere Lounge.